Alright, hey, this is Armoth again, starting a second project. This one is a G.I. Joe Hammer Humvee. I actually didn't know that this vehicle even existed until a little bit ago, but seems like trying to fetch one complete is running anywhere between $75 to $100. If you buy it online, you got to pay some sort of crazy shipping fees. Found this in a local shop. It appears to be complete except for the ammo box that fits there. I'll probably source one of those online. It has the gas tank. It has the tripod. It has both missile launchers, and it does have the side guns. But of course, as with most hammers, those pieces have broke off the side rails. So we're going to do a little pin and glue technique on those. We're going to clean it up, probably take all the decals off and put some reproduction on there because I am all about display quality. Not trying to fool anybody, but I really do like it when they're clean and shiny and have bright new decals. It has all those seat clips in here. As you can see, it also has the inner workings. It's got the fan belt, it's got the manifold, the back. These do slide out, although I'm probably going to have to put some graphite to make them slide out a little bit easier. So overall, it was a pretty good buy, and I think once I'm done with it, it's going to look really good, and we'll just put it up on the shelf with a few figures for a while, and we'll go ahead and get started. Alright, so essentially we have three broken parts we're dealing with here. Two of them are these rail-mounted pegs that have the gunnery supports on them. Another one of the missile launchers. On the missile launcher, you'll see that there's two clips, and one of them broke off of this one. That's the one we're going to tackle now. Actually, it's pretty simple. We're just going to use a brace to fuse the pieces back together, and I have opted to use a Lego sword. So we'll cut the handle and the cross guard off of the sword, and essentially what's going to happen is we will glue one side to the sword like that, and then glue the other part of the sword to the stub that's been left behind. And hopefully with a little bit of super glue and Blue Fix, we will restore that missile launcher to where it'll clip in to the back of the hammer. Alright, so you can see that I went ahead and cut the sword, put a little bit of angle on the end of it to match this, and now it's ready to glue together. I will glue it to the broken piece first, and then I will attach it to the missile launcher. Alright, so I did have to use a different plastic element, but you can see how I fused it together just to kind of create a bit of a splint for that piece. That's what it looks like on the other side. And we will be attaching it to the base of the missile launcher next, and then filling in as much as we can with Blue Fix to try and tighten it so it won't ever come off again. Alright, we're back with the hammer, and this time I'm going to tackle the arm mechanism that pops into here and attaches to one of these guns. I actually took the liberty of pre-drilling the holes for the pin and glue method. You can see, there it is. And so I just found a small nail. I cut the head off the nail, and then I took a drill bit on the end of my rotary tool and did my best to center those holes for each side. And that drill bit that I chose is going to be slightly bigger than the nail, just so I can get a little wiggle room in there. And let me just put this up on the stand. All right. So we just, essentially you're just putting the one side of the nail in. Oops, upside down. And then you can see that's a real nice fit on the seam. So you can barely even see the crack that had been formed when it was broke. So next step is we're going to glue it and then seal it in place. All right, so here I have gone ahead and put some glue on and put the one end of the nail pin inside. I've actually put super glue around all the edges. I am going to take a moment to just squeeze out a little on this side. And don't do too much, I just tend to dab it because I don't want it pouring out the sides of the seam. Okay, so we do have, there's a little bit coming out of the seam, not a lot. If you don't like that, then we can take an X-Acto knife and scrape any excess off. So that's what I have so far. Looks like it's fitting pretty well, but I'm going to put some pressure on it to try and get that glue to attach to the edges nice and tight. All right, I've given the glue some time to dry, and you might be able to see that I probably put a little too much glue around those edges. And as you know, super glue tends to dry with a little white haze around it. So it's going to be up to me whether I want to take an X-Acto knife and scrape some of that glue off. The seam looks really good in terms of fitment, but again, there's just that little bit of glue residue I'm going to have to deal with. While this one was drying, I went ahead and pinned this one up, and this one fits extremely well together. So even without glue, I mean, look at that. Without glue, that looks seamless to me. So I'm going to try and reduce the amount of glue that I put around the seam and just focus on putting the glue inside the hole and on the pin itself, just to come up with a better looking piece. In cases like this where you do have too much of a haze forming, you're going to want to let the glue dry all the way, but you can just take an X-Acto knife and just start scraping that layer off. If you need to, use a toothbrush to clean it, and ultimately you could probably mix up a tiny dab of paint just to cover the seam, and that should do it for you. In the next frames, I will attach them to the hammer and see how it looks. All right, so after just a little bit of a bath and a scrub and kind of picking at it with an X-Acto knife, it looks pretty good. I don't see much residue, and I think once it's actually in its socket, you can't even see the underside anyway. There's a pretty good view of it. The other one looks pretty good. So I just took a X-Acto knife, scraped off some of the excess, and then used a toothbrush and took off all the surface. So because I want to use this for display, I definitely want to put the guns back in, knowing full well that somebody in the future might want to pull them out. So before I would resell this, I would push the pegs back out from the bottom. But before I do that, I'm actually going to use a bit of graphite, and I'm going to coat the peg here. Yeah, I probably shouldn't do it on the tablecloth. Sorry about that. And then I really should do this with 2 hands. So I'm just going to kind of brush that all around. And then I'm going to push down and twist. And that's eventually how I'm going to get that back into the peg. And I may not go all the way. I may leave it at that height. Of course, there's the stand that wants to slide in. Our repair has still made it so that this piece can fit in. And then maybe that gives me a bit more leverage to push down on it a little bit. So I may not push it all the way in, but there you go. Pretty neat. And I'll put the other one in, and then put all these other parts back on the hammer. And I still have one more piece to fix, and it is the missile mount. I'm gonna have to pin this one too, because splinting it did not work. I tried 2 different types of adhesive, and it just wouldn't stick together. So you see how thin that part is right there. I'm gonna have to use probably a sewing needle or push pin, and actually drill a hole and connect it, and then reinforce it with some sort of epoxy. So I will get back to that momentarily. All right, and there is the hammer all put together. These side-mounted guns, which forgot the foot peg slot slides in there, so that actually covers any of the unsightly super glue residue. We got the missile pegs back in, functions pretty well. And so it looks like we are missing 2 pieces. We're missing the ammo box, which is pretty easy to find, and the antenna, which is much harder to find. But all around, one of my favorite vehicles that I don't see up for sale very often. But if you can get a bit crafty, you can repair some of these broken parts and end up with a pretty sweet vehicle. Thanks for watching.